business can help solve this problem, provided it gets out of the mindset of producing something here in a big factory, controlled conditions, and then transporting it all over the countryside in trucks to sell it all over the marketplace. I don't think that's going to work. If they do want to contribute, then they have to now devise decentralized production as well as marketing systems, which are closer to the markets, and they can then make money out of a very different business model, which is much less threatening to the environmental resource base and can produce results for people because they both are creating jobs as well as products and services they need. If you are going to solve the problems of climate change, you're going to have to solve many of the problems in the third world. In the third world, you're going to have to solve the problems of water and housing and energy, cooking, lighting, everything else, and indeed energy for industries. That is something that a company, a big company, a multinational, cannot find very interesting because they're far away, they don't produce the same kinds of profit margins, and many other reasons. So, frankly, I think one job is for the developing countries, for the poorer nations of the world, to build the capacity of their own businesses to be able to innovate and deliver into the market products that market needs. In doing so, they can probably learn and get help from the big companies. There can be an intermediary role that the big companies can play in transferring certain kinds of technology, etc. But I think it's pretty limited. Financing systems like technologies carry their own DNA in them, and the financing systems that come from the World Bank and from big banks and so on are automatically so lumpy, so big, that they can only be used for big projects, which are exactly the opposite of what we need. If you want to switch to renewable energy, sun, wind, microhydro, biomass, they're inherently small. It's decentralized. They're far away. They can't be lumped together into a big project. Very few of them can. And so by borrowing money from the World Bank or from Deutsche Bank or Citibank, I'm automatically constrained to do big things, which are the exact opposite of what I should be doing, which is introducing decentralized, renewable, etc. based solutions. So there's a limit to how far business and the present structures, the political structures and the economic structures of the world can solve these problems, because actually they're very good at creating them.
The interesting one we might learn something from is the way, for example, in India, the communication technology has been developed. So one did not need to rebuild all the copper network, but leapfrogged directly to the mobile. And it could be that in technology, that might also be an approach. So maybe more decentralized, and doing that on a large scale, then all of a sudden it would be an investment where you could bring partners in which can't do if it's too local. On the other side, I think what the crisis tells us, especially the financial one now, is that by optimizing one direction, you really cut down your resilience. You get extremely vulnerable to any type of shock. And I think if you look what value we seem to have created over time, how quickly we destroyed it now, in what short a time, probably would have been better off thinking about what's the right size of institutions in some areas and what's their interplay, and to what extent you need to build in either links that can be broken and the system still works, so things become more modular and how they interact, and on the other side still replicate some of the learnings of the systems that work in other places, rather than to reinvent, or instead of reinvent, just to export the technology at a place where, as you mentioned before, using oil only makes sense as it is so cheap, but solar energy would be abundant. And that's also one thing we looked into, how to bring local technologies to fruition in a local context. And what we've often seen is that, and that's probably where the sustainability principle does link so much to insurance, is that when you only look at the economics, you try to externalize as many costs as you can, because it's often short-term profits if you go that road. if you try to internalize costs, for example, environmental liabilities, putting a price tag on an environmental liability by sometimes forcing people to get liability insurance means also they need often to have a environmental impact assessment for a specific project. And it does foster a different approach and often different thinking in terms of some of these projects. And would they be smaller in scale, they often by definition more adapted to the local environment.
I think the only real way to go forward for business to make a difference is to help business extend its time horizons. As long as they have short time horizons, they are not in a position to make the right decisions. Those time horizons are determined by the shareholder value concepts of maximizing shareholder value, and they are determined to some extent by legislation on reporting performance, etc. By and large, it's hard for a business person, a business leader, to have a time horizon of much more than a few months. So I'm afraid under the present system, I don't really see how you can get business to do the right thing, and we would have to have fairly fundamental changes in the way the ownership patterns, the decision-making systems, the board and governance systems are construed. They'd have to be pretty fundamental changes if you want to extend the time horizon to a level, to a period that really makes any sense from an environmental point of view.
One thing I think where insurance concepts can contribute to that type of a change in thinking is, as in order to operate our business, we do need to take future risks into account. So we do internalize a future risk landscape. And one of the duties I have in this company is to think the unthinkable and make sure these things do get put into the equation when we think about risks today. Now, this isn't that easy because it's a market too. And if you have additional information which makes risks more pricey, you first would only price yourself out of the market. And that's why we are so keen on a dialogue on risks, because often it's really an interesting concept that if we are not sharing the information we have about risks, we're most likely not adding any value to the market. Prior to Katrina, we had a model in place which was far too expensive. So people said, with that model, we cannot basically write business in the market. And even after Katrina, we had to change that model. So we were perceiving on a scientific perspective risks as being higher than they were perceived by the market, and I stick to perceiving because we didn't know. We just had the feel that it would be more risky than what people think in a market. But even that thought of being more risky wasn't adequate with what we've seen in the place. So we need to learn together and need to learn pretty fast in order to cope with the changing climate.